So if you watched my last video of my first time taking the New Edge Mustang drifting, you saw this car had an incredible amount of body roll and the front tires were pushing. Now, one of the ways to fix the fact that the front tires are pushing was I got some 200 treadwear tires to put on the front. That's gonna help big time. But also, this car's on stock suspension. I wasn't kidding. I took this thing out bone-ass stock, but it ain't gonna be that way anymore. Now, because I actually drove it and I figured out what the car needs, the first thing I really figured out that it needs is a really good set of coilovers. What I ended up getting is a set of Feal coilovers. Feal sells a bunch of different types of coilover options for your car. I spent probably 45 minutes on the phone with Steven from Feal, and he really helped me customize the set of coilovers that I'm really gonna want for the car. And I'll go over it with you as I put them on. But first, we're gonna get the car up on my quick jacks and get started on taking the old suspension off and putting the new stuff on. Unboxing is always like my favorite thing to do. It's like Christmas. Let's see what we got. I'm gonna do the front first and then we'll do the back, just because it's gonna be easier for me on the quick jacks. So let's get these out of the way. So these are 24 millimeter nut, and on the other side is a 22 millimeter bolt. So those have to come out top and bottom. And then up here, these look like 13 millimeters. This is 1, 2, 3, and then the whole coilover should come out. We're gonna take this bracket off too, because I think we're gonna replace that. And then our sensor comes off, and that'll allow us to get access to the other two. Those are gonna be tougher to get off. We're probably gonna need a breaker bar. Put that guy there. This one there. There we go. All right, so I was able to get the bolts out with the brake caliper on. I think the other side I'll probably take it off though, but it can be done. So once those two bolts are out, we'll work our way up to the top, take those off, we'll drop the old shock out. All right, so as I use my thing on the top one, I'm gonna hold my hand on this so when it does come out, it should come right out. Pretty easily, actually. Whoop. That's our old whoop shock. Now, just to show you guys, see the spring in there? And see this here? This is not a coilover. This is just a shock. When they call it coilovers, it is where there is a coil spring over the shock. So this is actually not a real, we're not taking off coilovers, we're taking off shocks and springs and putting on true coilover suspension, which are much more stable and better for drifting, track, you name it. So stock Mustangs do not have coilovers. And actually, the suspension on this was worse than we thought, because this spring is cracked right there, shot right off. We are putting on our adjustable camber / caster plates, and they're designed for two different ways. You could put one on like that, which would adjust the camber. Now, you could also switch it up and call it race, you can adjust the caster. We're gonna put it on the passenger side, that way we can adjust the camber of our front suspension while, instantaneously. Should be very easy to do. This will replace our factory one. There we go. Okay, so with the cover over it, it's gonna protect us from dust, dirt, grime, and all the other stuff. We're gonna go ahead and put it on. Now, I'm gonna try to adjust this thing so it's as high as possible, because I take this thing on and off a trailer and I don't want to bottom it out, and the exhaust already sits pretty low. So we're gonna try to put it on and have it as high as possible, but still look kind of cool. It's gonna be lower than it was stock, so there at least is that.
What I ended up doing was taking the camber plate off and actually putting it right on the top of the coilover and put it all in one shot. That made it a lot easier to get it all together. Unfortunately, I'm not see-through, so you can't see what I'm doing, but I'll tell you. So what I'm doing here is I have the bottom of the control arm on a floor jack so I can lift it up and adjust. And then I put one bolt in on the bottom of the coilover so it kind of holds it in place, and then slowly jack up the control arm until it fits right into the top of the shock mount on the tower. That was the easiest way to do it. It really wasn't that hard.
So I just stuck it in 1.5 inches before the bottom. That's how I'll know it is the same on the other side. And with the camber plate adjustment, I can move that like that. And that can adjust my camber if I'm on the street, drift, I can adjust it like that, which makes it pretty cool. Or I might just leave some camber on, I don't know, we'll see how it does. But that seems to be where I want to have it, 1.5 inches from the bottom of this here. So you stick your finger in, I measured 1.5 inches, and I'm gonna do the same thing on both sides. Okay, so now we got the top in. These get torqued to 26 foot-pounds, and then those big nuts and bolts, that gets torqued to 148 foot-pounds, and then we put that outer bracket on over top of it with the other nut. And once we're done with that, put this guy back on the outside. All right, so passenger side is on, all installed, everything's tightened down, torqued down. I was able to do it without taking the caliper off. I might try to do that on the other side, we'll see. Like I said, top torqued to 26 foot-pounds. So I'll do the driver's side off camera, but then I will show you guys what the back looks like.
If you're looking for a great way to support our channel, check out lowboostfilms.com. Not only does this support the channel, but you'll look great while you do it as well. We have a great selection of different types of apparel and merchandise that you guys can buy. I also have a selection of car parts and tools that we've reviewed on the channel that we know work well for sale on there as well at a good price, so make sure you check it out.
I think I might have to do some massaging here and cut this a little bit to fit the coilover. We'll see. As per what Feal said to do is to get just a strut tower brace in the rear to go over the back, because as you can see here, this is a separate spring and shock, and we are going to be replacing that now with a true coilover shock system in the back. So we're just going to want to stiffen that up a little bit.
All right, so with the jack supporting the diff, I unbolted the shock from the shock mount, and that allowed me to slowly lower the diff down enough to get the actual coil spring out with a big old bar. Next up, we had to remove the top of the shock. That's a 15mm bolt. Comes out pretty easily. Then I was just able to remove it by hand, and then the shock itself just dropped right out. The next thing I noticed was the fact that the coilover really didn't fit in perfectly. I felt like I might have to trim those edges there in the back, which I was definitely right about. Apologies for the sound. I had two old guys arguing in the background, so I just decided I'd talk over this. I also decided it'd be a great opportunity to wake up the entire neighborhood at about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night with a cutoff wheel, but it didn't take me that long to do. I just made a couple gouges, cut it out, and then just kind of hit it out with a hammer. You don't need to do much. As you see here, I'm not taking a whole lot off, but that was just enough. And then I just hit it with some paint. I know it doesn't look good. I just don't want it to rust, and no one's really ever going to see it except for you guys. But that fit in just fine, so we finished out the bottom end of the back. So with the shock in up top, I slowly jacked the car up and just wanted to make sure that everything lined up well. So I just had to kind of move the bottom of the coilover out and around. I had already locked it into where I think the height is going to be in the back, and I ended up being pretty spot on with the height comparatively to what it used to look like. But just with some finagling of it, I was able to get it in, and once it was in, then I just put the bolt in and tightened it down just loose until I had everything all together, and then I torqued it down.
All right, let's lower it down, see how it looks. Back looks okay. The front, we're gonna have to lower that a little bit. Get 1.5 inches underneath it wasn't gonna work, so we'll put it back up and lower it. It looks pretty hilarious. The back looks a 1/2 inch lower. It does, so we'll even that out. Okay, let's try this again. How's it look? Much better, much better. That's pretty close to what it was stock. Might even be a hair higher. The other thing I did this time is I gave it a little bit of camber, not a lot, just a little bit. Just literally sliding it across this. I can back it back out if I want. So let's take that for a little spinneroonie and see how that feels. So I thought I was crazy because I couldn't get the top bushing on. I just didn't want to risk it, so I actually ended up using the old one and just kind of hogged it out. But once I lowered the whole car, it pushed itself up. My biggest concern was stripping the threads. So once the car was on the ground, it really compressed itself down for the first time fully. So I'll take this guy off. I'll put the one that was included in the kit on there, and we'll tighten it back down. All right, so it's gonna be hard to really figure out how much better this is drifting, not drifting. We're on the street right now, but I could at least take it around the block and see how much different it feels. And I can just tell you, just by putting around the block, it's stiff. It's definitely stiffer. So I don't have a sway bar in the front. I have 12K springs in the front to make up for the fact that there's no sway bar. This car doesn't have a sway bar, but if I wanted to put one on, that would really stiffen things up. So they recommend to go a little higher with the spring in the front. That way you don't, because once I put an angle kit on this thing, I'm not really going to be able to run a sway bar. It's going to hit. So they'll build you out the kit and give you 12K springs in the front, which, you know, really kind of seems to work really well. This car, it's actually planted now. It actually drives pretty good. Before this thing was a boat. I mean, wow. I'm really impressed. They really won't be able to see until we actually like go drifting. But let me tell you what, just driving around the block, going from stock suspension to Feal 441s, big noticeable improvement just driving it around. So I drove the car around for a little while, and it seems to be so much better with those coilovers. Gonna need a little bit more adjustment to make it right, but it's basically set for the next drift event, which is coming up in a couple weeks, so I hope to show you guys that soon. In the meantime, if you see behind me, I don't have the Mustang in the garage. I don't have the Corvette in the garage. I don't have the GMW in the garage. I have the Factory 5 Type 65 Shelby Daytona Coupe. And if you're interested in watching me build one of these, now that I have it here at my house, I'm gonna have a whole lot more time working on it than I did before, so make sure to stick around and follow along for that. If you can't wait until next week's episode, make sure to check out these videos that I already have ready to go.